drift into a quiet journey across the vast, silent plains of Mars, where the wind whispers through endless red sand and time seems to slow with every breath. Far from Earth, under a sky filled with distant stars, one astronaut remains, alone, calm, and determined. With only his thoughts and the soft hum of his equipment, he turns isolation into survival, carefully growing life in a place where none should exist. As you listen, let the stillness of space settle your mind. Imagine the gentle rhythm of his routine, the soft crunch of Martian soil beneath his boots, the quiet glow of a distant sunrise over an alien horizon. There is no rush here, no noise, only patience, resilience, and the peaceful solitude of a world untouched. Now, close your eyes and let the night carry you gently into dreams. In the year 2035, a crew of astronauts arrives on Mars aboard the Hermes spacecraft for what is meant to be a 31-day mission. Their landing site is a wide, dusty region known as Acidalia Planitia. The crew works with focus and discipline, carrying out scientific tasks, collecting samples, and preparing experiments that will help humanity better understand the red planet. On the 18th day of their mission, everything changes. Mark, the mission's botanist, is outside the habitat collecting soil samples for chemical analysis. His work is careful and methodical, as he studies the Martian ground, searching for clues that might help future missions grow food on this distant world. Nearby, his crewmates continue their own tasks, communicating through their suits and staying alert to any changes in the environment. Inside the habitat, Beth, the system's operator, monitors the weather data. Suddenly, a warning appears on her screen. A powerful dust storm is approaching faster than expected. She immediately calls the crew and tells them to return to the habitat at once. The astronauts pause their work and look toward the horizon. Dark clouds of dust are already rising, sweeping across the Martian surface with alarming speed. The storm is far stronger than anything they had planned for. Mark and Alex, the mission's chemist, suggest waiting it out. They believe the structure of the habitat might withstand the storm. But Commander Melissa studies the data and the growing storm outside. She knows the risk is too great. If the storm damages their Mars Ascent Vehicle, or MAV, they will be stranded with no way to return to orbit. She makes a firm decision. They must evacuate immediately. The crew quickly prepares. They secure their equipment, suit up, and move toward the exit. The moment the hatch opens, the storm slams into them with full force. The wind howls, carrying dust and debris that reduces visibility to almost nothing. They struggle forward together, leaning into the wind as they make their way toward the MAV. Mark stays at the back of the group, making sure the habitat door is properly sealed behind them. The storm grows more violent by the second. Melissa urges everyone to move faster. The MAV is in danger of tipping over. Without it, there is no mission, no return home. Mark calls out that they might be able to secure the MAV using cables and one of the rovers. But before they can act, disaster strikes. A large satellite dish is torn loose by the wind and hurled across the landscape. The crew barely has time to react. They duck to avoid it, but Mark is just a moment too late. The dish slams into him. He is thrown off his feet and disappears into the swirling storm. The crew freezes in shock. Their scanners immediately register a warning. Mark's suit has been breached. His vital signs vanish from their monitors. Melissa refuses to give up right away. She calls out for him, searching through the storm, but she cannot see anything beyond a few meters. The wind is too strong. The danger is too great. Chris, the mission surgeon, speaks with quiet urgency. A suit breach in these conditions means only one thing. Mark cannot have survived. At the same time, the MAV begins to tilt under the force of the storm. Melissa faces an impossible choice. Stay and risk the entire crew or leave one behind. With heavy resolve, she orders the team to board the MAV. She takes one last look into the storm, hoping for any sign of Mark. There is nothing. Reluctantly, she joins the others. The engines ignite, and the MAV launches into the sky, leaving Mars behind. Inside the spacecraft, the crew sits in silence. Each of them feels the weight of what has happened. They have lost a teammate, a friend. There was no time, no choice, but that does not make it easier. On Earth, officials prepare to address the world. The mission is returning early, and one astronaut will not be coming home. But on Mars, the storm eventually passes. The winds calm, the dust settles, and in the quiet that follows, something unexpected happens. Mark opens his eyes. His suit alerts him that his oxygen levels are dangerously low. He is alive, but only just. A piece of debris has pierced his suit, yet it has also sealed the hole enough to keep him from losing all his air. Disoriented and in pain, Mark realizes the truth. He has been left behind, alone on Mars. But he is not giving up. Not yet. Mark forces himself to stay awake. Pain spreads through his body as he struggles to move, but the warning alarms in his suit are clear. His oxygen supply is dangerously low. He cannot afford to rest. With effort, he reaches the piece of metal lodged in his suit and carefully pulls it free. The moment it comes loose, air begins to escape faster. He has only minutes. Gathering what strength he has left, Mark stumbles across the rocky ground toward the habitat. Each step feels heavier than the last, and his vision blurs, but he keeps moving. The habitat is his only chance. At last, he reaches the airlock and forces his way inside. The system pressurizes, and he collapses onto the floor, gasping for breath. For a moment, he simply lies there, letting the reality sink in. He survived. But survival is only the beginning. Once he regains some strength, Mark turns his attention to his injury. The piece of metal that pierced his suit also went into his body, and part of it is still inside him. Gritting his teeth, he gathers medical tools and begins the painful process of removing it. It is not easy, but he works carefully and steadily. When it is finally done, he seals the wound as best as he can. Now, for the first time since the storm, Mark has a moment to think clearly. He is alone on Mars. The rest of the crew believes he is dead. There is no communication with Earth because the main antenna was destroyed in the storm. The next planned mission to Mars will not arrive for 4 years. For years, Mark looks around the habitat. The supplies here were meant for 6 people for just over a month. Even if he stretches everything as far as possible, it will not be enough. The situation is clear. If he does nothing, he will not survive. Determined to face the problem head-on, Mark powers up the computer system and begins recording a video log. He speaks calmly, documenting everything that has happened. from the storm to his injury and his current condition. If he does not make it, at least there will be a record. But as he talks, something shifts in his tone. He is not ready to give up. After finishing the log, Mark begins taking inventory of the habitat. He checks the food supplies, the water reserves, the oxygen system, and all available equipment. Everything must be accounted for. Outside, another storm begins to form, though not as severe as the first. Inside, Mark spends the rest of the day resting, letting his body recover from the shock and injury. The silence is overwhelming. Hours pass slowly, and with no one to talk to, Mark begins to feel the weight of isolation. To keep his mind occupied, he starts organizing the habitat. He carefully gathers his crewmates' belongings, placing them into labeled containers. It is a simple task, but it gives him a sense of control. As he sorts through their items, he finds photographs, pictures of families, friends, and moments from Earth. He studies them quietly. These are the people his crew hopes to return to. And suddenly, a thought becomes clear in his mind. He is not going to die here. The next morning, Mark wakes with a new sense of purpose. If rescue will not come for 4 years, then he must find a way to survive until then. He begins by examining the food supply more closely. There are packaged meals, rations, and a small amount of fresh food saved for a special occasion. Among these items, he finds something unexpected. Potatoes. A simple ingredient, but to Mark, they represent possibility. As a botanist, he understands how plants grow, what they need, and how to create the right conditions for them. If he can grow food on Mars, he can extend his survival far beyond the original supplies. An idea begins to take shape. Mark decides to turn the habitat into a makeshift greenhouse. He gathers Martian soil and brings it inside. On its own, the soil cannot support plant life, but Mark knows how to improve it. Using his knowledge and the limited resources available, he creates a form of fertilizer. It is not pleasant work, but it is necessary. Once the soil is ready, he carefully cuts the potatoes into pieces, ensuring each one has a section that can sprout. He plants them in rows, treating them with the same care he would give in any laboratory or greenhouse on Earth. Now he waits, but growing plants requires water, and water is limited. Mark studies the equipment available to him and realizes he may be able to create more. By using leftover rocket fuel and the tools in the habitat, he attempts to produce water through a chemical process. The first attempt goes wrong. The reaction becomes unstable, and a sudden burst of flame forces Mark to shut everything down. He steps back, realizing his calculations were off. On Mars, even a small mistake can be deadly. He does not panic. Instead, he reviews his work, corrects his errors, and prepares to try again, this time with protective gear and greater caution. When he activates the system again, it works. Water begins to form. Mark watches closely, making sure everything remains stable. When the process is complete, he has what he needs, not just to drink, but to support his growing crops. For the first time since being stranded, Mark allows himself a small moment of satisfaction. He has food growing. He has water. He has a plan. Days pass and Mark settles into a routine. He records daily logs, monitors his crops, and performs maintenance on the habitat. He even ventures outside to clean the solar panels, ensuring they continue to provide power. Each task brings him one step closer to survival. On the 54th day, something remarkable happens. Mark checks his garden and sees small green shoots pushing up through the soil. The potatoes are growing. He smiles, feeling a sense of accomplishment that cuts through the loneliness. Back on Earth, people believe him to be gone. But on Mars, Mark is very much alive. And he is not giving up. The days on Mars begin to blend together, but Mark keeps himself focused. Each morning, he checks his potato crops. Each afternoon, he maintains the habitat and cleans the solar panels. Every evening, he records a video log, documenting his progress and thoughts. The routine gives structure to his life and keeps his mind steady. By the 70th day, Mark knows he cannot think only about surviving in the present. He must start planning for the future. The next mission to Mars will arrive in 4 years, but it will land far away, over 3,000 kilometers from his current location. If he wants to be rescued, he will have to travel there on his own. It is a daunting idea. Mark studies the rover, the only vehicle he has left. It works well, but it has limits. Its battery can only support a trip of about 35 kilometers before needing to recharge. A journey of thousands of kilometers would require careful planning, extra power, and a way to survive for weeks inside the vehicle. He begins to think through each problem one at a time. Meanwhile, back on Earth, something unexpected is discovered. At the Space Center, a satellite operator receives a request to examine a specific set of coordinates on Mars. When she zooms in on the area around the abandoned habitat, she notices something strange. There are changes. The patterns around the habitat do not match what they should be if the site had been untouched since the storm. Equipment has been moved. The ground looks disturbed. She immediately alerts her superiors. Within minutes, key members of the mission team gather to review the images. They study them carefully, comparing them to earlier satellite photos. There is only one explanation. Mark is alive. The realization sends a wave of shock through the room. Teddy, the administrator, quickly understands the situation's seriousness. If the public learns that an astronaut was left behind on Mars, the reaction could be overwhelming. At the same time, the crew aboard Hermes has no idea that their friend survived. The team begins to debate what to do. Some argue they should immediately inform everyone, both the public and the crew. Others believe they need more information first. They do not know how long Mark can survive, and they have no way to communicate with him yet. Despite the uncertainty, one thing is clear. They must try to reach him. Soon after, Teddy steps in front of cameras at a press conference. He announces that new evidence suggests Mark may still be alive, but he admits they do not yet know his condition or how to contact him. Around the world, people react with hope and concern. On Mars, Mark continues his work, unaware that Earth is now watching him. His thoughts remain focused on survival. He examines the damaged rover from the storm and realizes he can use its parts to improve the one that still works. By combining components, he manages to double the rover's battery capacity. To test his modifications, Mark takes the rover out for a drive. The Martian night is cold, far colder than he expected. The temperature drops sharply, and he realizes that using the rover's heater would drain too much power. If he is going to travel long distances, he will need another solution to keep warm. Back in the habitat, Mark considers his options. There is one piece of equipment that could help: the radioisotope thermoelectric generator. It produces heat, but it is also dangerous because it contains radioactive material. Retrieving it will require extreme care. Mark prepares himself and ventures out once more. Working slowly and cautiously, he digs through the sand where the generator was buried. Every movement is deliberate. He knows that one mistake could have serious consequences. After careful effort, he succeeds. He retrieves the generator safely and brings it back to the rover. With this new heat source, long-distance travel becomes more possible. While Mark continues to solve problems on Mars, the team on Earth focuses on restoring communication. They study old mission data and remember a long-forgotten probe, the Pathfinder, which landed on Mars decades earlier. It stopped functioning years ago, but its location is known. If Mark can find it and repair it, they might be able to establish a connection. On Mars, Mark has already been thinking along similar lines. As he studies maps of the surrounding area, an idea forms. There is something nearby that could help him communicate with Earth. Without hesitation, he sets out in the rover. After traveling across the dusty terrain, he arrives at the site and begins digging through the sand. Slowly, carefully, he uncovers the old Pathfinder probe. It is worn and silent, but not beyond hope. Mark loads it onto the rover and returns to the habitat. Using all his skill and patience, he begins repairing the old machine. At the same time, engineers on Earth prepare a replica of Pathfinder. They work to re-establish the communication system, hoping that Mark will succeed. Days pass as both sides work toward the same goal, separated by millions of kilometers. Finally, the moment comes. The repaired Pathfinder powers on. Signals travel across space. And for the first time since the storm, Earth receives images from Mars. In the habitat, Mark sees the camera respond. He quickly creates simple signs, yes and no, and places them where the camera can see. He asks a question. The camera moves to yes. Mark laughs with relief. He is no longer alone. Communication is slow and limited at first. Using written signs and camera movements, Mark and the team on Earth begin exchanging information. It is not easy, but it works. To improve the system, Mark finds a chart on one of the crew's computers that assigns letters and numbers to specific codes. He arranges these symbols around Pathfinder, creating a way to send more detailed messages. The engineers on Earth quickly understand what he is doing and replicate the system. Soon they can communicate clearly. Mark tells them how he survived and makes sure to explain that the crew was not at fault. He knows they made the only choice they could. In return, Earth sends him instructions how to modify the rover, how to improve communication, and most importantly, reassurance. They have been watching him, and the whole world is hoping for his rescue. For the first time since being stranded, Mark feels something new. Not just determination, hope. With communication finally restored, Mark's world begins to feel a little less empty. What started as simple yes or no signals quickly grows into something much more useful. By arranging letters and numbers around the Pathfinder camera, Mark creates a system that allows full conversations. Takes time and patience, but it works. On Earth, the engineers carefully follow his method, matching his setup so they can respond clearly. Soon, real messages begin to flow between Mars and Earth. For the first time since the storm, Mark can explain everything. He tells them how he survived the impact, how he made it back to the habitat, and how he managed to grow food. He also makes one thing very clear. His crewmates are not to blame for leaving him behind. Given the situation, they had no other choice. Back on Earth, the team listens closely. They are impressed not just by his survival, but by his determination and problem-solving. Mark has done what no one thought possible. In return, they send him instructions. One of their first goals is to improve communication further. They guide Mark through modifying the rover so it can send signals directly to Pathfinder, removing the need for the slow camera ensign system. The process is complex, but Mark follows each step carefully. After some effort, the upgrade works. At last, Mark receives a proper message from Earth. Vincent, one of the mission leaders, sends him a direct transmission. He explains that they have been watching him for some time and that people all over the world are rooting for him. He also promises that they are working on a plan to rescue him and will send supplies to help him survive until then. Mark reads the message quietly. For months, he has been alone, solving problems with no certainty that anyone would ever find him. Now, he knows that he has not been forgotten. But there is one question he cannot ignore. What about his crew? When he asks about them, the response is not what he hoped for. The team explains that the Hermes crew has not yet been told that he is alive. They want the astronauts to focus on their journey back to Earth without the emotional burden of knowing the truth. Mark does not like this decision. He feels strongly that his friends deserve to know. In frustration, he begins sending messages filled with complaints and jokes, letting out the stress that has built up over time. Back on Earth, the team understands his reaction. They know the situation is difficult for everyone involved. Meanwhile, Mark continues his daily routine. His potato farm is thriving. He carefully harvests the larger potatoes while replanting the smaller ones to keep the cycle going. The system works, and for now, his food supply is stable. However, life on Mars is never simple. One day, after completing routine maintenance outside the habitat, Mark returns inside. First, everything seems normal, but suddenly there is a malfunction. A pressure issue causes a small crack in the structure. Before Mark can react, the situation worsens. There is a sudden burst, an explosion inside the habitat. The force sends equipment flying. The airlock is torn loose and rolls across the ground outside. Inside, the pressure drops rapidly. Mark is thrown off balance, and his suit is damaged once again. Air begins to escape. Thinking quickly, he grabs tape and seals the cracks in his suit as best as he can. It is not perfect, but it is enough to keep him alive. He stabilizes himself and regains control of the situation. Once the immediate danger passes, Mark looks around. What he sees is devastating. The explosion has destroyed his crops. All the plants he worked so hard to grow are gone. For a moment, he stands in silence. Months of effort, gone in seconds. With no other choice, Mark gathers what supplies he can and heads to the rover, where he spends the night. Alone in the cramped space, he finally lets his frustration out, shouting into the emptiness of Mars. Back on Earth, the team receives the update. Vincent calculates the remaining food supply. Without the crops, Mark has only about 200 days left. It is not enough. Teddy immediately orders the team to speed up their plans to send a supply probe. They must reach Mark before his food runs out. To help keep his spirits up, they also connect his communication system to the Hermes spacecraft. Now, Mark can exchange messages with his crewmates as well. When the connection is established, it changes everything. The next day, Mark begins repairing the habitat. He seals the damaged areas and clears out the destroyed garden. It is difficult work, But he does not stop. At the same time, he starts rationing his remaining food. Each meal becomes smaller, carefully measured to last as long as possible. The nights feel longer now. Outside, storms continue to pass across the Martian surface, reminding him how fragile his situation is. On Earth, the pressure grows. Engineers work day and night to prepare the supply probe. They shorten timelines, double-check calculations, and push themselves to the limit. Everyone knows what is at stake. For Mark, survival has become a race against time. He has faced storms, injury, and isolation. Now he faces something just as dangerous: running out of food. But even after everything, Mark refuses to give up. He has come too far to stop now. Life on Mars becomes a careful balance of patience and urgency. Mark continues to repair the damage inside the habitat, sealing cracks and restoring what systems he can. Without his crops, the space feels emptier than ever. What was once a small, growing garden is now just bare soil again. He doesn't allow himself to dwell on it for long. Instead, he focuses on what he still has: his skills, his equipment, and his connection to Earth. Through the upgraded communication system, Mark now receives regular messages. The team at NASA checks in constantly, asking for updates on his health, his supplies, and even the smallest details of his daily routine. While their concern is genuine, it sometimes feels overwhelming. Mark jokes that they are trying to manage every part of his life from millions of kilometers away. Still, he knows they are doing everything they can to help him survive. He also begins receiving messages from people all over Earth. Leaders, scientists, and even ordinary citizens send words of encouragement. One message informs him that, by successfully growing crops on another planet, he has technically become the first person to colonize Mars. Mark finds humor in that idea. Even in a dangerous situation, he holds on to his ability to laugh. But time is running short. With his food supply reduced, every day matters. He carefully measures each meal, stretching his remaining potatoes as far as possible. Sometimes, he even mixes small amounts of medicine into his food to stay healthy despite the limited nutrition. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the race to save him intensifies. The team works tirelessly to prepare a supply probe that can reach Mars in time. Normally, such a mission would take many months of planning, but under the circumstances, they push themselves to complete it in a fraction of the usual time. Engineers test designs, calculate trajectories, and assemble the spacecraft as quickly as possible. Everyone understands the risk of rushing, but they also know that waiting too long is not an option. As the probe nears completion, hope begins to rise. For Mark, it represents a lifeline. For the team on Earth, it is their best chance to keep him alive. Finally, the day arrives. The probe stands ready for launch. Scientists, engineers, and mission leaders gather to watch, their attention fixed on the screens. Every detail has been checked, at least as much as time allowed. The countdown begins. Engines ignite, and the rocket lifts into the sky. At first, everything goes according to plan. But then, something goes wrong. A small error in the calculations caused by the rushed preparation creates a problem with the probe's trajectory. The spacecraft begins to drift off course. Within moments, the situation becomes critical. Then, in a sudden flash, the probe is destroyed. The room falls silent. Months of effort, gone in an instant. No one speaks at first. The weight of the failure settles over everyone present. They all know what this means. On Mars, Mark is still counting on those supplies. And now they will not arrive. Vincent is given the difficult task of informing Mark. When the message is finally sent, there is no way to soften the truth. The mission has failed. On day 186, Mark records a new log. His tone is different now, quieter, more reflective. He asks for a message to be delivered to his commander, Melissa. He wants her to check on his parents when she returns to Earth and tell them about his time on Mars. He wants them to know that he loves them, and that he is proud of what he has done. Even in the face of uncertainty, Mark does not lose his sense of purpose. Back on Earth, the team refuses to give up. A new opportunity begins to form. Far away, another space agency has been watching closely. They possess technology that could help, a more advanced booster that could send supplies faster than anything currently available. There is one condition. The technology is classified. If they share it, the mission must remain confidential. The world cannot know. After careful consideration, Teddy agrees. Saving Mark matters more than recognition. As work begins on a second supply mission, a new idea emerges. Rich, an expert in orbital mechanics, studies the problem from a different angle. Instead of sending supplies directly to Mars, he proposes a more complex plan, one that involves the Hermes spacecraft itself. His idea is bold. The new probe could be sent to intercept Hermes as it travels near Earth. The crew could collect the supplies and use a slingshot maneuver around the planet to gain speed, redirecting their course back to Mars. From there, they could rescue Mark. But the plan comes with serious consequences. It would add hundreds of days to the crew's journey, keeping them away from their families far longer than expected. It also carries significant risks. If anything goes wrong, the entire crew could be in danger. The decision is not an easy one. Teddy ultimately decides not to move forward with this plan. He believes the risk is too great and chooses to focus on the safer option, sending another supply probe. However, not everyone agrees. A message containing the details of the alternative plan is quietly sent to the Hermes crew. When they receive it, they gather together to discuss what to do. Commander Melissa speaks honestly with her team. She explains the risks, the sacrifices, and the consequences. If they choose to act on this plan without authorization, it could be considered a serious violation of protocol. Could even end their careers. But when the time comes to decide, the answer is clear. They choose to go back. They choose to save their friend. Without waiting for approval, the Hermes changes course. Back on Earth, the team quickly realizes what has happened. The spacecraft is no longer following its original trajectory. The decision has been made. The rescue mission is no longer just a possibility. It is underway. On Mars, Mark continues his preparations, unaware of the full extent of what is happening. He is still fighting to survive one day at a time. But far above him, beyond the thin Martian sky, help is finally on its way. On Mars, Mark continues preparing for the long journey ahead. With his food supply limited and no certainty about when help will arrive, he focuses on what he can control. If he is going to be rescued, he will need to reach a specific location where another Mars ascent vehicle is stored. That means traveling thousands of kilometers across harsh terrain, completely alone. To survive the trip, Mark begins modifying the rover. He carefully studies every part of it, thinking about how to turn it into a vehicle that can support life for weeks. He adds extra storage for food and supplies, reinforces the power system, and installs the radioisotope generator to provide heat during the freezing nights. Each change is tested and adjusted until he is confident it will work. Back on Earth, the situation grows more complex. The Hermes spacecraft has changed course, and now the world knows. News spreads quickly, and people everywhere follow the story. The mission has become more than a rescue. It is a symbol of teamwork and determination. At NASA, Teddy faces the consequences of the crew's decision. He understands why they did it, but it does not change the fact that they acted against orders. Still, there is no time to dwell on that now. The focus must remain on bringing everyone home safely. To support the new plan, scientists and engineers work together across nations. The advanced booster provided by another space agency is prepared for launch, and teams coordinate every detail of the supply mission. Despite differences in language and culture, they share a common goal: save Mark. Meanwhile, aboard the Hermes, the crew begins adjusting to their new mission. They contact their families, explaining that they will be away much longer than expected. It is not an easy conversation, but their decision is firm. They are going back. Mark, still unaware of all these developments, continues his work. Day by day, he transforms the rover into a mobile home. He creates space to sleep, organizes his supplies, and ensures he can recharge the vehicle using solar panels during the journey. Finally, the rover is ready. He takes it out for a test drive, carefully monitoring its performance. The modifications hold up well, and for the first time, the long journey feels possible. At the same time, the new supply probe is launched from Earth. This time, every detail has been checked and rechecked. The launch proceeds smoothly, and the spacecraft enters its planned trajectory without any issues. Hope returns once more. As the probe travels through space, the Hermes prepares to intercept it. The timing must be exact. When the moment arrives, the crew successfully captures the probe and secures it to their ship. Everything is falling into place. Months pass. On Mars, Mark continues to wait and prepare. He maintains his equipment, monitors his health, and keeps recording logs. The isolation is still difficult, but he has learned how to manage it. Then, at last, the time comes. On day 461, Mark stands inside the habitat for what may be the final time. He records one last message, reflecting on everything he has been through, the challenges, the setbacks, and the small victories that kept him alive. He looks around the space that has been his home. Then he begins shutting everything down. One by one, the systems go offline. The lights dim, the equipment powers down, and the habitat grows quiet. Before leaving, Mark marks the day on the wall and signs his name. A simple reminder that he was there, that he survived. With his preparations complete, he steps into the rover and begins his journey. The Martian landscape stretches endlessly before him. There are no roads, no signs, only dust, rocks, and distant hills. Mark drives carefully, conserving energy and following the route he has planned. Every few hours, he stops to recharge the rover using solar panels. During these breaks, he rests, eats small portions of food, and sometimes simply looks out at the vast, silent world around him. There is a strange beauty to it. He realizes that he is the first person to see many of these places up close. Days turn into weeks. The journey is long and demanding, but Mark stays focused. He keeps track of his progress, checks his equipment regularly, and adjusts his plans as needed. On Earth, the team monitors everything they can. At one point, a serious problem is discovered. The Hermes will not have enough fuel to enter Mars' orbit and still make the return trip home. This creates a new challenge for the rescue. To solve it, they come up with a difficult solution. The Mars ascent vehicle that Mark will use must be made much lighter. They will remove as much weight as possible: seats, panels, and even parts of the life support system. Mark will have to rely on his suit for oxygen. The top of the vehicle will be covered with lightweight material instead of solid structure. It is a risky plan, but there are no better options. When Mark receives the instructions, his reaction is immediate. He is not happy. The plan sounds dangerous, unpredictable, and more than a little unreasonable. Still, he understands the situation. If he wants to get home, this is the only way. By day 538, Mark reaches the destination, a crater where the other Mars ascent vehicle has been stored. He steps out of the rover and looks at it. This machine is his ticket home. But first, he has to take it apart. Over the next several days, Mark works tirelessly. He removes unnecessary components, strips the interior down to the essentials, and prepares the vehicle for its modified launch. Each step brings new challenges, but he handles them with the same determination that has carried him this far. By day 560, everything is nearly ready. On the Hermes, the crew prepares for the final phase of the mission. Each member is assigned a role, and they review the plan again and again. There is no room for error. Back on Mars, Mark faces one final moment. He eats the last of his food. Then he leaves a note inside the rover, a message for whoever might find it in the future. A small piece of history left behind on a distant world. After that, he puts on his suit and climbs into the Mars ascent vehicle. For the first time since the storm, he can speak directly to his crewmates. Their voices come through the communication system, and the sound fills him with emotion. They came back for him. Melissa begins the countdown. The engines ignite, and the vehicle lifts off the surface of Mars. The final stage of the journey has begun. The Mars ascent vehicle rises from the surface, shaking as its engines push it upward. Inside, Mark grips his controls tightly. The modified craft feels fragile compared to what it once was. With so many parts removed to reduce weight, there is little margin for error. He must trust the plan and the people guiding him. Above Mars, the Hermes waits. Inside the spacecraft, Melissa and the crew track every detail of Mark's ascent. Each of them has a role, and every movement is calculated. The timing must be exact. If anything is off, even slightly, the rescue could fail. At first, everything goes according to plan. Mark climbs higher, leaving the dusty surface behind. The thin atmosphere offers little resistance, and the MAV accelerates quickly. For a brief moment, it seems like all the risks are paying off. Then something goes wrong. The lightweight covering at the top of the MAV cannot withstand the pressure difference. Tears away, exposing the interior. Air rushes out, and the sudden loss of pressure makes Mark dizzy. Within seconds, he loses consciousness. On the Hermes, alarms sound. The crew reacts immediately. They send commands to stabilize the MAV and shut down what systems they can to prevent further damage. They monitor Mark's suit, hoping it will keep him alive. After a tense stretch of time, Mark regains consciousness. He is disoriented, and the pain in his body has worsened. He reports that he may have broken ribs, but he is still able to function. The situation is far from ideal, but he is alive, and that is what matters. However, a new problem quickly becomes clear. The MAV is out of fuel earlier than expected. It is now drifting farther away from the Hermes than planned. The crew considers their options. They could use some of their backup fuel to close the distance, but doing so would increase their speed too much. If they approach too fast, they will not be able to safely connect with Mark. Time is running out. Mark listens as they explain the problem. He thinks for a moment, then suggests an idea, one that sounds risky even to him. He could create a small hole in his suit and use the escaping air as a kind of thruster, pushing himself toward the Hermes. It is not a perfect solution. In fact, it is dangerous. But it shows the kind of thinking that has kept him alive this long. Melissa considers his idea and builds on it. Instead of risking Mark's suit, they could create a controlled release of air from the Hermes itself. By removing part of the ship's airlock, they could generate enough force to adjust their position. It is a bold plan, and it carries serious risks, but there are no better options. The crew moves quickly. Alex begins preparing a device using available materials to create a controlled explosion. Chris carefully sets it in place near the airlock. Every step is done with precision, knowing that a mistake could damage the ship. Meanwhile, Melissa prepares for another possibility. If the maneuver is not enough, she may have to go outside the ship herself. The tension inside the Hermes grows as the final calculations are made. Everything must be exact. At the right moment, the device is triggered. The explosion sends the airlock section away from the ship, releasing a powerful burst of air. The force pushes the Hermes in the direction they need, adjusting their trajectory just enough. It works, but there is still a small gap between the ship and the MAV. Without hesitation, Melissa puts on her suit and prepares for a spacewalk. She is connected to the ship by a tether as she moves out into the open void. Mark watches as she approaches. The distance between them is closing, but not fast enough. As she reaches out, it becomes clear the tether is too short. Mark realizes what he must do. Carefully, he creates a small opening in his suit, allowing air to escape in a controlled way. The force begins to push him, slowly at first, then faster. He struggles to control his movement, spinning slightly before adjusting his position. On the Hermes, the crew guides Melissa, giving her precise instructions to match Mark's trajectory. The moment comes. Mark drifts past her, just out of reach. Their hands touch briefly, but it is not enough. For a second, it seems like they have missed their chance. Then Mark manages to grab hold of the tether. Melissa pulls him closer, using all her strength and the support of her crew. Slowly, steadily, she brings him within reach. This time, she does not miss. She grabs him firmly. Together, they begin the journey back to the Hermes. Inside the ship, the crew works quickly to bring them in. Once the hatch is sealed, the tension finally breaks. Mark is safe. After everything, the storm, the isolation, the endless challenges, he has made it back. The crew gathers around him, relieved and overwhelmed with emotion. Far below, Mars continues its silent orbit, and far away on Earth, people watch and celebrate. The rescue is complete. Mark is going home. Inside the Hermes, everything feels different. For the first time in a long while, Mark is no longer alone. The crew quickly helps him out of his suit and into the medical area. Chris examines him carefully, checking his injuries and making sure his body is stable after the intense journey. The broken ribs are painful but manageable. Compared to everything he has been through, it is something he can recover from. Mark is exhausted. His body has endured months of strain, and now that the danger has passed, the fatigue finally catches up to him. The crew encourages him to rest, and for the first time since the storm, he allows himself to truly relax. He is safe. As he drifts in and out of sleep, the sounds of the ship surround him. Soft mechanical hums, quiet conversations, and the steady rhythm of life aboard Hermes. These simple noises feel comforting after so long in silence. When he wakes, he is greeted by familiar faces. Each member of the crew takes time to speak with him. There are smiles, quiet laughter, and moments of reflection. No one says it directly, but they all feel the same thing. They are grateful he is back. Mark thanks them. He knows what they risked to return for him. They extended their mission, put themselves in danger, and faced uncertain outcomes, all to bring him home. Melissa listens, then gently reminds him that they made the choice together. No one hesitated. On Earth, the successful rescue spreads across the world. People gather in cities, watch from their homes, and celebrate the moment. What once seemed impossible has become reality. An astronaut stranded on another planet has been brought back through determination, teamwork, and courage. At NASA, the atmosphere shifts from tension to relief. Months of stress, long hours, and difficult decisions have finally led to success. Engineers, scientists, and mission leaders take a moment to breathe, knowing their efforts made a difference. Mark continues to recover. Day by day, he grows stronger. He begins moving around the ship, slowly at first, then with more confidence. He shares stories with the crew about his time on Mars, the challenges he faced, and even the small, strange moments that helped him stay focused. He talks about the potatoes, the long drives across empty landscapes, and the quiet nights inside the rover. Some of the stories make the crew laugh. Others remind them just how close he came to losing everything. But through it all, one thing stands out. Mark never gave up. As the Hermes begins its journey back to Earth, life on board settles into a steady rhythm once again. The mission is not over, but the most dangerous part has passed. Mark now has time to reflect. He thinks about Mars, the place that nearly became his final home. He remembers the challenges, but also the lessons. He learned how to survive with limited resources, how to stay focused under pressure, and how to keep hope alive even in the most difficult moments. He also thinks about the people who helped him, the team on Earth that worked tirelessly to find solutions, the crew that chose to come back for him, and the countless individuals who believed in his survival. Together, they made the impossible possible. As weeks turn into months, the Hermes continues its journey. Mark spends time helping where he can, sharing his knowledge and assisting with tasks. Though he is still recovering, he wants to contribute just as everyone else has. He is no longer just the man who survived on Mars. He is part of the team again, and this time they are all heading home together. Far behind them, Mars grows smaller in the distance. Ahead, Earth waits. The long journey is not over, but it is filled with something that was once uncertain: hope. The journey back to Earth is long, but it feels lighter than before. Inside the Hermes, the crew settles into a steady routine. There are still responsibilities to manage and systems to maintain, but the tension that once filled the ship has faded. The most dangerous part of their mission is behind them. Mark continues to recover. Each day he grows stronger. His injuries heal and his energy slowly returns. With time, he is able to move freely around the ship and even assist with small tasks. Being useful again gives him a sense of normalcy he hasn't felt in months. He spends hours talking with his crewmates. They share stories, not just about Mars, but about Earth, their families, and the lives waiting for them when they return. Mark listens closely, appreciating the simple comfort of conversation. For so long, he had only his own voice for company. Now, he is surrounded by people who understand what he has been through. The crew also takes time to reflect on their decision. Choosing to return for Mark was not easy. It meant risking their mission, extending their time in space, and facing unknown dangers. But as they look around the ship and see him there, alive and recovering, none of them doubt that they made the right choice. Back on Earth, preparations begin for their arrival. Scientists, medical teams, and mission officials organize everything needed to welcome the crew home. The world continues to follow their journey, counting down the days until they return. For many people, the mission has become a powerful reminder of what humans can achieve when they work together. Mark, too, thinks about what comes next. He knows that returning to Earth will not mean the end of his story. In many ways, it will be a new beginning. What he experienced on Mars will shape the rest of his life. He begins recording new logs, not out of necessity, but out of reflection. He speaks about the challenges he faced and the lessons he learned. He talks about problem solving, resilience, and the importance of staying calm in difficult situations. He hopes that one day, others can learn from his experience. As the Hermes draws closer to Earth, excitement builds. The blue planet grows larger in the distance, a familiar sight after so much time away. For the crew, it represents home, safety, and the end of a long journey. For Mark, it is something even more. It is a second chance. When the spacecraft finally enters Earth's atmosphere, the crew prepares for re-entry. The process is intense but controlled. After everything they have faced, this final step feels almost routine. The ship descends, and at last it lands safely. Cheers erupt across mission control. Around the world, people celebrate. The crew has returned. Mark steps out of the spacecraft alongside his teammates. The air feels different, richer, heavier, alive in a way Mars never was. He takes a deep breath, appreciating something he once nearly lost. He is home. Medical teams quickly guide the astronauts through initial evaluations, ensuring they are all in good condition after their long time in space. Mark's recovery continues, but he is stable and improving. In the days that follow, the crew is reunited with their families. These moments are filled with emotion, relief, joy, and gratitude. For months, they were separated by vast distances and uncertainty. Now they are together again. Mark's reunion with his parents is especially meaningful. He had once prepared himself for the possibility that he would never see them again. Now he stands before them, alive and safe. It is a moment he will never forget. As time passes, life begins to settle. The mission is studied, analyzed, and remembered as one of the most remarkable events in space exploration. Scientists review the data, engineers examine the challenges, and planners look ahead to future missions. But beyond the technical details, the story leaves a lasting impact. It shows the power of perseverance, the importance of teamwork, and the strength of the human spirit. For Mark, the experience changes everything. He chooses to share what he has learned by helping train future astronauts. As a survival instructor, he teaches them how to think clearly under pressure, how to solve problems with limited resources, and how to keep going even when the situation seems impossible. He speaks from experience, because he has lived it. Years later, a new mission to Mars is launched. This time, it carries not just equipment and supplies, but the knowledge gained from everything that came before. As the rocket rises into the sky, it represents more than exploration. It represents progress, and a reminder that even in the most distant and challenging places, humanity will always find a way forward.